Let us know when we're streaming. Well, actually, okay, we're here, and I call to order the Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, March 17th, 2026. And I'm looking to administration to see if anyone present was asked about the land acknowledgement. Dr. Cottle, do you know who's giving the land acknowledgement today? Okay.
Mr. Shinbein is in the washroom. Sorry, we're back to back all day, but I'm happy to fill in on his behalf.
Okay.
And we'll just note that he's due to do it another month. So we do always like to start these meetings with the land acknowledgement to take a minute to center us all and remind us what we're doing in being here, and that we're working on behalf of the community today, but also the community of the future. And so we want to be really good stewards of the land, of the people, and of this special place. So with that spirit and intent, I want to acknowledge that I'm really grateful to live, work, and play here in Treaty 7 territory, which is the home of the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprised of the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nation, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and our most adjacent and very beloved Stoney Nakoda neighbors, the Bearspaw, Chiniki, and Goodstoney First Nation, as well as the Battle River District for Métis of District 4. And we really do believe and try to instill in all town staff that we are all treaty people and we all have a responsibility to be good stewards.
Great, thank you very much, Dr. Cottle, and I acknowledge that Mr. Shinbein will be washing your vehicle and other services to make up for his absence. Turning to the agenda, are there any changes to the agenda? Not seeing any. I'll move approval of the agenda for March 17th, 2026, Committee of the Whole meeting as circulated. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. All right, we have a delegation, Legassy Municipal Services for our 2026 tax year assessment mail-out summary. Welcome. And whenever you're set up, don't rush, but whenever you're set up, the microphone is yours.
So good afternoon, Your Worship and members of Council. Thank you for the invitation to present to you today.
You could just point the microphone directly toward you. Perfect, thank you.
Sure. Thanks for the invitation to present to you today. My name is Deanne Bannerman and I'm with Legassy Municipal Services. And our team at Legassy is proud to be preparing and providing the assessment services for the town of Canmore. So today I appreciate the opportunity to walk you through the changes we've observed in the latest assessment roll. I believe it's important for Council to have a solid understanding of these updates, as they may help you to address inquiries from property owners, as well as give you a little bit of peace of mind. As it has been 4 years since we've done a fulsome kind of overview of the assessment process, and we have a couple new members of council, we thought that we would provide a brief overview of the whole assessment process in Alberta, as well as a high-level overview of how the assessment base in the town of Canmore is evolving and what that means for the community. So property assessments in Alberta are prepared in accordance with the Municipal Government Act and matters relating to assessment and taxation regulation. The regulation establishes the valuation standards, procedures, and quality objectives that municipalities must meet when preparing assessments. Under this framework, the assessor is legislated to prepare annual assessments using mass appraisal process. Property assessment is the mechanism that allows for the fair and equitable distribution of the municipal taxes, the provincial education requisitions, and any other levies. It's important to emphasize that the assessment distributes the taxation. It does not determine the total revenue collected. This remains the function of council's budget and tax rate decisions. So with the exception of designated industrial and linear properties, which are assessed by the province, the municipality is responsible for preparing assessments each year. Depending on the property type, assessments are based on either regulated value or market value. So regulated value applies to specific property types prescribed by the province. The assessments for designated properties, industrial properties, and linear are prepared by the provincial assessor and reflect provincially determined rates rather than open market transactions. Regulated value does not represent market value. So all of the other properties in the town of Canmore are assessed at market value. Market value represents the amount a property might reasonably be expected to realize if it was sold on the open market by a willing seller to a willing buyer. The legislation requires that the market value assessments be prepared using mass appraisal. They must estimate the value of the fee simple estate in the property and reflect typical market conditions for similar properties. So there's a few key dates that are important for this year's assessment process. The assessments, which were mailed out for the 2026 tax year, reflect market values as of July 1st, 2025. It's important to note that the assessment values always look back in time, so they represent the market from about 8.5 months ago. Because of this, people often think that assessments are supposed to be lower than the actual market value, but in fact, we are legislated to value the properties for the assessments between 95% and 105% of the market value as of that past valuation date. So mass appraisal is a way to ensure fairness in the assessment process. Rather than valuing each property individually, we analyze market data for groups of similar properties, creating valuation models that can be applied consistently across all properties within that group. Because of this system, the assessment values derived will not, nor should they be equal to the sale price for each property. Since we're required to use all of the valid sales valid sales within a spectrum, there will be a range in values between the sale price and the assessment. An assessment within approximately plus or minus 5% of the sale price is considered acceptable within a mass appraisal framework. This is because mass appraisal considers that there are different seller and buyer motivations, and there's often a difference in the buyer's personal preferences. That being said, this approach is important for ensuring uniformity and equity in the assessment process. Additionally, not all sales are used in the analysis. Transactions between related parties, atypical sales, or sales occurring after our July 1st, 2025 valuation date are excluded to ensure that the assessments reflect typical market conditions. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the highest and best use. This is an appraisal principle, which also informs our assessments. Each property must be valued as though it were put to its most probable and profitable legal use, given the physical, financial, and regulatory constraints. So in a community such as Canmore, the principle of highest and best use is particularly significant. The town is experiencing sustained redevelopment pressure in both the residential and the non-residential sectors. Older single-family dwellings, as everybody can see, are frequently being purchased for demolition and replacement with larger, more dense, or more modern homes. Similarly, aging commercial buildings are being redeveloped into mixed-use, higher density, or visitor accommodation projects. Market evidence in these areas often demonstrates that Purchasers are paying prices that reflect the redevelopment potential, not the contributory value of the existing improvements. When this occurs, the assessor must reflect the market reality in order to maintain equity. So with respect to the approaches to value, the direct sales comparison approach is used when there is sufficient market data available. For Canmore, we analyzed 3 years of valid sales from July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2025, and then we applied time adjustments to those sales in order to reflect the market conditions as of July 1st, 2025. The cost approach estimates value by adding the depreciated replacement costs of the improvements to the land value. And it's used generally where properties are under construction or where sales data is limited. The market modified cost approach is a hybrid of both the cost and sales comparison approaches to value. Under this approach, all improvements are first valued based on the cost approach, and then the values are adjusted to reflect the current market conditions based on the sale transactions. And then the income approach is applied to income-producing properties such as rental, commercial, and visitor accommodation properties. This approach estimates market value by converting the anticipated income into present value using typical rents, expenses, and capitalization rates that were derived from both owner-reported data and the broader market information. So we want to touch just briefly on property exemptions. If we were to go into actual the various different nuances, we'd be here for days, and I don't think anybody wants that. So I'll just try to keep it really on a high level. So the Municipal Government Act and Community Organization Property Tax Exemptions Regulation, which we favor to call COPTER, they provide for certain properties to be exempt from taxation. Some properties are accessible but exempt from taxes, while others are not accessible at all, and that would be things like roads. Typical exemptions include property used for government, education, religious, charitable, cultural, or historic purposes. So in addition to those that are set in the legislation, Council has a limited authority in the MGA to grant exemptions to certain nonprofit organizations, as well for machinery and equipment. And conversely, they are able to make certain exempt properties taxable, and so that would be things like student dormitories, which we don't have to worry about here. So it's important to understand that exemptions reduce the taxable assessment base, and therefore the remaining tax burden is redistributed to all the other property owners in town. So following the mail-out of assessment notices, as I mentioned, on February 26th, so this is the period we're in right now, there's a legislated 67-day assessment review period. The complaint deadline this year is May 5th. This period promotes transparency and allows for informal discussions with property owners where we can make corrections and provide property owners then have the right to file a formal complaint with the Assessment Review Board if necessary, if they don't agree with the assessor. So once we move into the complaint, so once a complaint is filed, the matter is heard by the Assessment Review Board. This functions as a quasi-judicial tribunal which is independent from administration and council. The complaint process is limited to assessment matters such as value, classification, subclass, and equity. It does not allow appeals of council's tax rates or budget decisions. Residential complaints are heard by a local assessment review board, while multi-residential and non-residential are heard by the Composite Assessment Review Board. So these boards have the authority to confirm, reduce, or increase an assessment. And those decisions may be appealed on questions of law or jurisdiction to the higher courts. So this is a highly legislated process through the MGA and matters relating to assessment complaints regulation. And this regulation sets out the rules for the exchange of evidence, which ensures transparency and especially procedural fairness. So the town of Canmore has a supplementary assessment bylaw. Supplementary assessments apply to new construction or newly completed improvements that were not included in the annual assessment roll. These assessments are then prorated based on the number of months that a property was either completed or occupied during the year, ensuring that the newly improved properties contribute fairly to municipal services. Assessment quality is monitored through provincial audit and compliance standards. The assessment roll must meet these legislated standards before we can declare it and assessment notices can be mailed. The regulation requires that the median assessment to sales ratio fall between 95 and 105%, and that the coefficient of dispersion remains below 15 for residential property and below 20 for non-residential property. These property assessments are audited annually by Alberta Municipal Affairs, and detailed audits are conducted on a regular cycle. I believe the last audit that the town of Canmore underwent was for the 2020 assessment roll. So now this is probably what you guys are more interested in than the assessment background. So let's look at the numbers. The previous year's taxable assessment base stood at approximately $13 billion. For 2025, that figure has risen to just over $14.5 billion, marking a 13.8% increase. This increase consists of two components. There's the growth, and then there's market value changes. So new development and property improvements contributed roughly $310 million, or 2.4% of the total increase. The remaining 11.5%, which is approximately $1.5 billion, is attributable to the market value changes. And also just a reminder that some of the components of the assessment base, such as the designated industrial properties and the linear properties, are assessed by the province. So at the time where we produced this information, we had not yet received the designated industrial values from the province. And they really don't make up a lot of the town of Canmore's assessment roll or base anyways. So it's not really going to significantly impact these numbers. So now when we talk about market changes, when we refer to market change, we're discussing how property values have shifted between July 1st, 2024 and June 30th, 2025. As you all can appreciate, Canmore is a very unique market, and it has several distinct neighborhoods and property types. Valuation trends can vary significantly across these different areas. Rather than seeing a uniform increase or decrease across the board, please keep in mind that we often observe submarkets where they behave differently based on their characteristics and the demand in the market. So not every property in town is going to change by the same percentage as the typical. And those of you who have been here before probably recognize this, but I have to say it every year. It's important to clarify that changes in the assessment due to market movement do not generate new movement or new revenue for the municipality. They just redistribute taxation based on relative value shifts. So here's what we're seeing in terms of the average market value changes. Residential properties have increased by an average of 12.4%. The residential detached housing increased approximately 15.4% out of that, where the residential condos increased 7.3%. The non-residential properties have seen a slightly lower increase than last year at 6.4%, and the lodging condos play a significant role in the market trends. They themselves increased by 5.8%, which was a slower increase than we've seen in the last several years. The overall assessment increase sits at 11.4%. So if we shift our focus to the assessment growth, this occurs when new developments, renovations, or land use changes add value to a property that was not previously accounted for. For 2025, the total assessment growth amounts to approximately $310 million. Residential properties contributed roughly $164 million, while non-residential properties added about $146 million in that. Assessment growth represents a 2.1% increase from the previous assessment base. Some notable growth, new developments that are contributing to this year's assessment include Spring Creek's Black Swift Lodge, Bow Meadows Industrial Condos, the residential condos at 1330 First Ave, and the Ascent Canmore Visitor Accommodation Condos at 1430 Bow Valley Trail. I think it's also important to bring forward any of the potential hotspots for this year's valuation so that Council is informed. On the residential side, we continue to conduct annual property reviews to update our data and improve accuracy. Some areas that were re-inspected will be seeing notable assessment adjustments this year, and they include Cougar Creek West and Cougar Creek East, Juniper Ridge, and the Homesteads area, which some of them we started the previous year and just finished this year. Additionally, in older neighborhoods near the downtown, such as South Canmore, Lions Park, and Larch, the land value now represents a larger portion of the total assessment as redevelopment interest increases. This is also the case for the properties in Teepee Town. So for the non-residential hotspots, one category experiencing significant year-over-year increases again this year is the traditional lodging sector, which includes the hotels and motels that are not condominiumized. These properties have seen an average increase of 27% this year on top of the 29.3% increase that they experienced last year. And this is largely due to the fact that we assess these properties using 3 years of stabilized income and expenses. So during the COVID-19 period, hotel revenues dropped significantly, which led to lower assessments. There were many of the underperforming properties that had been placed on a land threshold, which is done when the land becomes more valuable than the improved parcel. So now with this sector recovering and thriving, many have been put back to an income approach. And I think, like, with the uncertainty over traveling to the US and even most recently into Mexico, travelers are choosing to vacation domestically, and Canmore is a highly sought after location. The non-residential lands are also increasing again this year, especially in the downtown and along Bow Valley Trail. We've seen several sales of the older properties being purchased for redevelopment in both of these areas. Some of the older properties that typically would have been valued based on their income producing potential have been moved over to that land threshold because, again, this land is becoming more valuable than some of these older improved properties. So to wrap up, I just want to highlight some key dates. As I mentioned a couple times, assessment notices were mailed out on February 26th, so we've got lots of inquiries already coming in right now. The deadline for property owners to file a formal complaint with the Assessment Review Board is May 5th, 2026. And there's many excellent resources for property owners and for council. The town's website offers a great resource with FAQs, as well as the interactive community map, which was rebranded this year, which allows residents to compare their assessments with their neighbors. If you receive inquiries, you can always refer them to us. Our team is available by email at canmore@legassy.ca, and the town also has an automatic form on their website for assessment inquiries. So in summary, the 2026 tax year assessments reflect market trends as of July 1st, 2025, and ensures a fair and equitable tax base for the town of Canmore. I encourage council and residents to review the available resources and to reach out with any questions or concerns. So that wraps up my presentation. Thank you for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to present to you, and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Great, thank you very much for the presentation and all of the excellent information that you provided. Interesting note that I found out, with our total assessment being now 14.75 billion, wasn't that many years ago we just passed the 10 billion mark, but with 14.75 billion, that's the value of all the property in our town. We're actually on par with communities assessed value that are much larger than us, like St. Albert, Okotoks, Lethbridge, have similar total assessments as ours, and that just goes to show the high cost of property in this valley. So I find that absolutely blows my mind. So there are some questions here. First of all, Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Right.
Thank you very much. You touched on this, but I just wanted to go over it because I have heard from the community a fair bit on this one, and it's that idea of highest and best use. Yep. And we're going through some rezoning things right now, and people are concerned a little bit. You know, I currently have an R1 home, and it's about to be rezoned to something else. Let's just assume that an R4 home could go on that lot. How does that affect their value and their assessment in that current year? And then we'll talk about something a little bit different after that. But yeah, just so that people understand that clearly.
Right, sure. So once the land use bylaw is approved, so before it's approved, nothing happens because it's not legal yet. So once it is approved, we would look at things. So if we're talking the difference between an R1 and an R4, we can look out in, South Canmore and see what happens there with the zoning changes. It's significantly higher value, market value. Those little houses that are there, and I think there's only a couple left, they're being redeveloped into the fourplexes there. So those units are selling for, or the lot, when it goes from an R1, say, to an R4, is more than doubling its value. So if we're talking about the R2, same thing, the more density that you can get, the developers are coming in, they're buying the older houses, tearing them down and rebuilding. So it would definitely increase their assessment, which means there's an increase to the market value because we're just reflecting what the market value is. So in terms of an investment for them, it's not necessarily a bad thing to go from R1 to R4, unless you don't want to move and you want to hold on to that house as a legacy home for your family, for future generations, and then you've got all these large properties all around you. So that would be the impact, but from a monetary standpoint, it definitely would increase the value. So there's another kind of nuance to that, because we've heard from some property owners about, changing some of the use, and if they want to keep it as a house, is somebody going to force them to change it into a duplex or to add commercial to it and things like that? So obviously when we're looking at the assessment, we're looking at the market value, which would be the inherent land, but we would also still be taxing it or applying an assessment code that would be residential to it. So even if there was it was changing to commercial, it would be grandfathered in as a residential assessment class, which affects the tax rate.
So your R1 lot could be worth more as an R4 lot.
I would say if there's development potential for it.
Right. We'll get to that question here.
Sometimes, with the water setbacks, they're here, and I recognize that they may be changing, or that's proposed to be changing and increasing those water setbacks from the previous land use bylaw. So if they can't build the fourplex on there, then it won't likely increase the market value. Right?
Yeah, and that was my next question, is if it feasibly couldn't happen, it doesn't have that value impact that it may have in other ones.
Exactly.
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot of creative builds in the town of Canmore that maximize the use of the lots as much as they possibly can. But again, when we go back to the highest and best use, if it's not possible for them to actually do that, then that's not the highest and best use. The highest and best use is in a house.
Right. So are you going through like lot by lot for those kind of more special, nuanced?
We would have to. Yeah, we would definitely have to. We've been, fortunate so far, where we're seeing in South Canmore with the change in zoning, those lots generally all supported
They're square and.
They're 6,500 square feet, like yeah. So they generally supported it. We do come into additional nuances. So we do look at the water setbacks, dry and wet, and we do adjust those properties if they can't fully develop to the maximum of their lot size because of those setbacks. So we do adjust the assessments for that as well, because it's reflected in the market.
So just to build on that, are there other considerations as well? Let's say in a little neighborhood that's currently just all R1, but they're all relatively new homes. Like maybe they just built a great big home there 2 years ago, and now it's R4. It's probably valued even as an R1. It was probably a great big value because it's a great big home. Would you still take a look at R4 if it's not likely to happen because of it's a new build and it's big and all that sort of thing? Like, how far does it go? It
would definitely come into consideration. I mean, when we're looking at the housing stock that's being redeveloped, we're looking at anything built prior to like 1980 is what we're seeing. So we do experience a little bit of that, specifically in like on the older Three Sisters Drive, where it's all R2 zoned now. And so we have duplexes there that are older, they're built in the 80s, 90s kind of thing. They're not likely even to be redeveloped, because you would have to have both owners of the duplex sell that property for redevelopment.
Yeah.
And the likelihood of that is, I mean, you don't know. So right now, it in our mind, it wouldn't be legally possible for them to do that. So, when we're looking at it and it's a newer house, obviously the land value isn't as strong in that as it being improved, because the likelihood of it being redeveloped is a lot less likely. But it's something we'd have to consider. We would be looking at the market to tell us that, not just estimating on our own. The market would tell us if it would become a tear down later on with the higher density.
Right.
Because they can sell those lots for a lot more and rebuild the fourplex on there. That's the buyer would have to, or owner would have to determine that.
Yeah. So I guess the takeaway is it's not one situation applies to all. Moving from an R1 to R4, if it's an older, smaller mining houses versus brand new, very large homes, or lots that can't hold the R4, all those things come into place to determine what's the highest and best use.
That's right. Yeah, it's making our job a little bit more complicated.
Your job more complicated. Thank you. I really appreciate that clarity for a lot of community members that are have concerns about that right now.
Yeah, no, perfect. And like I said, it's going to be the market that's going to drive that all. It's not going to be us. It's going to be not you. It's the market that's going to determine what the value is to that.
Councillor Murray.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Thanks for that great presentation. You mentioned that one of the hot spots was the traditional lodging. And it got me wondering, because sort of the more modern take on lodging is the visitor accommodations, and we're getting a lot of these larger visitor accommodation developments like the Ascent Canmore that you mentioned popping up. I'm just curious about how those are assessed similarly and differently to traditional lodging.
So because with the condominiumized lodging property, so the visitor accommodation that's condominiumized, we have many sales that we can rely on. So we value those on a direct sales comparison approach. And the reason for that is, first off, we have a lot of sales, but they're all individually owned. And so trying to gather and collect the income information for that to put it onto an income approach would be more difficult. But also, there's not as much risk inherent in the visitor accommodation that is condominiumized, because that risk is spread out over each individual owner. So that's why we value those that way. And when we're looking at the traditional lodging, so the ones that are operating one owner kind of, they're running it, they're taking on all that risk. They're worried about their daily rates and things like that. They're worried about the vacancy or occupancy and things. So they're more appropriate on the income approach. And so when we value hotels, they're done differently on the income approach than most other commercial or non-residential properties, in that we look at 3 years of stabilized income, and it's their actual reported income that we would be looking at. And then we make sure that everything's still fair and equitable between the different properties, but their income is so susceptible. So if you have things like COVID-19 where basically like they couldn't have anybody there, right? So that's where the land came and became more valuable. But now that they're recovered, I would say, and continuing to recover, they're doing very well. It just is more appropriate to do that method for them. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, that's yeah,
good.
thank you. That was great.
Sure.
Councillor Marin.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I just had a question. So there's people who are concerned about their assessment this year because it has gone up quite significantly. And I also sit on the assessment review board, so I know it's quite a process to go to an appeal. If people don't want to go to an appeal, but they have questions about how their property was assessed, or they feel like it wasn't assessed correctly for a variety of different reasons for their specific property, can they reach out to your team directly to get more information about that before they proceed to the ARB?
Oh, absolutely, and that's our preference. It's communicated that way on the assessment notice. It's communicated that way on the town's website. I mean, if we can have those discussions prior to it going to a complaint administratively, it's a lot easier, and it's also a lot easier on the property owner. So when we get those types of inquiries, which they can email us at canmore@legassy.ca, or they can call us, or they can fill out the inquiry form on the town's website. Once we get those, we look at their property, we send them the information that we have on their property so they can confirm the data. We provide them with an explanation of the assessment process, and we do provide them their comparable sales. So at that point, they can choose to come back and ask us questions, tell us that we have errors. And we'll look at that and resolve things that way. If we can't come to an agreement because we feel that the assessment is supported by market evidence and the data on the property, then that's when we would ask them to proceed to the next level.
And in that preliminary step, are there adjustments made occasionally based on the information that they confirm or that they have to correct?
Yeah, definitely. If there are corrections that are required for the property assessment or the data, we have the authority under Section 305(1) of the MGA to make changes to the current assessment rule.
Thank you for clarifying that. I think it's valuable information for people to know when they have concerns or when they do have a property that maybe doesn't align with the market that it's being compared to, that's their best first option, is to get that information and have that conversation informally before they move forward to the ARB. So thank you.
Okay. Yeah, and we really appreciate when people do, and they do take us up on that. We get lots of calls and emails, but one of the things that we notice that isn't maybe as clearly communicated to property owners in the town of Canmore, it's very unique in that they're always looking at the assessment change, what their change is compared to their neighbors, what their change is compared to the entire town. That's the number one inquiry that we get is percent change, and so we're always trying to redirect people back. What is your property worth? Because we're really trying to put people back into the market value mindset of what your property's worth. Town of Canmore for the last several years, ever since I've been working here, has had extreme increases, far more than most of the province. So I know it's difficult for them to swallow sometimes, but the market evidence is there, and the taxes don't go up at the same percentage or the same rate as their assessments do. So,
Thank you.
So I'm just going to ask a few things that are common questions just so that we all hear the answers and the public hears the answers. I'll deal with a couple of things you've just dealt with. The fact that your assessment goes up does not mean that your taxes are going to go up more or less than others. Am I correct in saying that the residential average went up 12.4%. If everybody's increase went 12.4%, then their share of the pie stays the same, and they in fact don't have a higher tax burden on them than their neighbor just because they went up 12.4%, if it was all across the board. Is that correct?
yeah, so if everybody went up the 12 point, I mean, it wouldn't work that way. It never works that way.
There's always some
Sometimes,
higher and
yeah.
lower, but if
There's always
everybody
some
did-
high and low, but if you are at that average increase of the 12.4% and say council had no increase that they requested or required from the municipal budget through taxation, and the provincial rate didn't increase, you wouldn't see a change to your assessed value. or
Yeah,
to your taxes, sorry.
I always communicate that there's three components that impact your total overall tax increase. One is the budget that's approved by council. Two, how your assessment increase compared to others.
Yep.
And compared to, not the others, to the average.
The average, yeah.
I mean, because some are more than the average and you'll get a higher bump. Some are less. And if you're on the average, you'll probably just get the amount that council. And the third thing is the education requisition. And the only thing that council has control over is the first one.
Exactly.
We can't control the assessments, that's controlled by regulations. We can't control education requisition, that comes from the province. Right, okay. The other thing you mentioned is people comparing it with their neighbors. And I have to admit, I do the same thing, and but more from the point of view is, can you help us understand how within a same neighborhood of similar homes, because they're all built to the same thing, let's say at the same time, how can they raise at different amounts? Because they would presumably have very similar comparables.
What a lot of people don't realize when they're looking at their neighbors' homes is that there are differences between their property and those other properties. So they're looking at just that percentage change, but they're not looking at even where they're sitting at the level of market value, so what their assessments are compared to their neighbors. So different things, and this is all market driven, so this is based on the sales, different things will appeal to potential purchasers,
Right.
or actual purchasers in this case. They'll appeal to different property owners differently. So when we're looking at, just shifting kind of thing every year, we've got some things, it's physical changes to the property. Some is reinspection programs will cause a lot more of the shifting. And we also pull in an entire new year's worth of sales when we're preparing the new assessments, and we drop off 1 year's sales. So depending on what those sales, new sales are telling us, because sometimes, say, you have this mansion and we didn't have any sales before, well, now we do.
Right.
So that'll impact it as we're trying to have the property reflect the market value.
So let me understand using an example. For my home, I'm in between two single-level homes, and I'm a two-story home. And if my home increases at a greater rate than the others, it may be because the market is showing that there's greater preference for a two-story home, more space, than the single-story. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Right. Because even though we're neighbors, you'd think, oh, it's the same market, but they could be very different markets because. Yeah.
And that's, goes back to the mass appraisal that we're required to do. So when we're stratifying the properties, we're looking at all those different components. We're looking at the quality of construction and finishes. We're looking at the building type, or structure type. We're looking at location. All of those factors are going into some of the stratifications. So as we get more information, sometimes we're seeing, like a certain property type that we hadn't had sales on before, and then they have to be adjusted. But really, when you look at things over a 5-year period, and you take all those percent changes over 5 years, they end up almost the same, very, very close. So it's not, maybe 1 year, it's a little bit more dramatic, but it does level off when you look at a 5-year time period.
Right. And then my last question is, because I've seen this a number of times, having been in this seat or one of these seats for a number of years. I was also on the Assessment Review Board for a number of years. What we see is often after there's been, because the assessor can't do a deep dive with every section of town every year. So they'll do a section of town, and you noted, that, and I think it was on either the town site or in the mail out, like Cougar Creek area, there was a reinspection. And often those reinspections see a higher tax increase because there's course corrections based on updating the information. I just would love you to speak to this one element that people don't like to hear, but it may be that a property was benefiting from actually being under-assessed for a couple of years, and then a reinspection happens, and it gets course corrected to where they should be, and it looks like a big jump, and they went, oh, it was fair there, but not fair here. But isn't it possible that they might have been underassessed and we're actually getting the benefit of having too low of an assessment?
Yeah, and so a perfect example of that would be renovations
Yeah.
that are done where they don't require a permit to be taken out of. So, we collect a lot of that information that way, corrections to data. Yeah, and so, they likely have been underassessed, because they didn't take out the permit. They were likely underassessed in the past.
But even if there was no changes, I'm seeing that can be the case. And I remember a couple years back, there was a condos on Bow Valley Trail, and there was a big jump on it, but the market had changed. And so they had actually benefited from a different market, lower assessment. It wasn't caught, and then inspection was done. It was like, oh, you should be up here.
Yeah.
To be where you should be. And so that's, people don't want to hear that usually, that they were benefiting before.
Yeah, exactly. They weren't paying their fair share of the taxes in
Yeah,
the past, right?
exactly.
That's really what it is.
Right, okay. Thank you. Looking to see if there's any other questions. Dr. Cottle.
I don't have a question, but I believe Ms. Gibbons was going to add just a little bit of detail around the link between assessment and education tax.
Okay. Great, thank you. Welcome.
And maybe while I give Ms. Bannerman a second to pass me over the HDMI cord, I also just wanted to give a bit of a shout out to Ms. Bannerman and her team at Legassy for how responsive they've been to us as administration, and also their proactiveness with communication in the community. So normally we would have tried to have her update today, which I know is incredibly valuable for all of us closer to that mail-out date. But with the council timing this year, we had a bit of a gap. So she proactively had given us a lot of the content that then formed our blog post and that we've tried to put out into the community. And that was really driven proactively by her and her team wanting to get this information out into the community. And so I just wanted to express my appreciation for all of that. At the same time, I also have an introduction to do. So at the back, I'm not going to put him in the hot seat today, but if he does a little wave, Mr. Young has joined our team as our new tax and utilities supervisor. So I won't put him in the spot today, but just wanted to introduce a face that I'm sure you'll be seeing a lot of in the coming time. And he's been a huge help to me already in pulling some of the information that I'll be going through really quickly here. So I think, Mayor Krauser, you'd already alluded to it, but that third piece that we don't have a lot of control over, but that is impactful is, sorry, I can't multitask, is the provincial education tax piece. And so now that the province has released its budget for 2026, there we go. And we have the assessment information. We did want to really quickly tack on a few slides to talk about the anticipated impacts for our community for this year. So as you may recall, we do receive separate requisition amounts from the province, both for residential and non-residential properties. Our residential requisition increased by 14% from the prior year, while the non-residential requisition increased by 18%. So overall, the resulting increase is 15% higher than our school support requisition in 2025. We then took this information and combined it with the assessment information to estimate the potential impacts to properties within Canmore. So our median residential assessment for 2026 is now at 1.212 million. And so for this median residential property, the estimated impact of the school support requisition increase would be roughly $30 a month. On the non-residential side, we don't generally use median values in the same way because there's such a large variability in the property types and hence the associated assessed values. But if we look at an average non-residential property with an assessed value of $956,000 for 2026, the estimated school support increase per month is slightly higher at $40 per month. So that impact is significant, but I just also wanted to identify that this is a consistent trend that we've seen in recent years and have spoken to previously. So again, if it was a median residential property and had been at the median for 24, 25, and 26, Again, there's that $30 per month increase we're expecting for 2026. That same property would have had a $22 per month estimated increase in 25, and $35, that was where we really started to see some of the more significant impacts back in 2024. So just over those last 3 years, those amounts total $87 per month more for the median residential property. So again, just wanted to highlight that the town of Canmore continues to be impacted disproportionately because of our higher assessed values. And so this isn't reflected in the value that comes back to our community, either through the school system or through its inclusion in other calculations for our allocations under programs like LGFF. So this is kind of hot off the presses based on the provincial budget and the assessment information. So we wanted to get in front of council today.
Great, thank
Or
you.
committee
Yeah,
of the
and I
whole,
think 24 was about, at that time, it was a 23% increase based on what the base was. And then the 22, I believe, was about an 18% based on what the base was. Now that's 15%. So the values will change, but you're always accumulating over time. I just had a question about the 1.212 median assessed value for residential. That's both condominium and single detached together, right?
Correct.
Good, because I've often used the two different numbers, single detached median being approaching 1.5, and I don't know what it is for this year. That's in the
1.7, I
past.
think, roughly
1.7 now?
Yeah,
And then condos was around 800,000, but now it's probably pushing maybe 9?
I can't remember. I do have those numbers
Okay.
as well. For today's presentation, I kept it simple. You're correct. The residential is a blend of single, detached, and condo. I do have those stats that closer
Yeah,
to
I just
tax
wanted to
time,
make
we
sure
do
that,
have
I just
those. Mm-hmm.
wanted to make sure that I wasn't wrong in what I've been saying before. This is now mixed. Okay, good. Any questions on the education component? All right, thank you very much. Appreciate that hot off the press information. Okay. Tell you what, let's take a quick break. Let's return at 2 o'clock, and we will have our Cultural Advisory Committee 2025 annual report. In? Okay, we're back. Next item on the agenda is approval of minutes. So turning to the minutes of February 17th, 2026 meeting, are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'll move acceptance of the minutes of February 17th, 2026 Committee of the Whole meeting as circulated. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And now we'll move to our Cultural Advisory Committee 2025 Annual Report. Ms. McPherson, welcome to Committee of the Whole, and whenever you're ready, the microphone is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Krauser and Council. My name is Jeannie McPherson. I'm the Supervisor of Arts and Culture, and I'm excited and pleased this afternoon to introduce to have the Cultural Advisory Committee 2025 Annual Report on the agenda. Thank you for that. And I'm excited and pleased to introduce Christine Moreland, who is the Chair of the Cultural Advisory Committee, to lead us through this presentation. Also want to welcome and acknowledge some folks from the Cultural Advisory Committee who are here in Council Chambers this afternoon, including Vice Chair of the CAC, the Cultural Advisory Committee, Micheline Maylor, and CAC member Dawn Saunders-Stahl.
Welcome, and we look forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Councillors. Like Jeannie said, I'm Christine Moreland, Chair of the Cultural Advisory Committee.
You just point the microphone towards your mouth. You don't need to move.
This
You can
way?
move the microphone if you like. Yeah, it just picks up better so we can hear. Great.
Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So today's a milestone for the CAC. It's our first formal report to Council. Woo. The volunteers on this committee have given close to 180 hours over the last 2 years. We genuinely believe that arts and culture do amazing things in this community. And today I want to show you what that commitment has produced and where we think Canmore's cultural life is really heading. So this afternoon, I'll talk about the period from 2023 to 2025. This is 2 years in which the committee has advanced meaningful work on the Cultural Master Plan and built the foundation for today's report. It's an opportunity to share what we've done and to open a conversation about how culture can be even more deeply woven into Canmore's future. So the Cultural Advisory Committee was established by bylaw in 2021, replacing the former Public Art Committee with a broader mandate. We report annually to Council on the Cultural Master Plan, which is a bylaw requirement. We also advise on implementation of the plan, foster partnerships in the creative sector, and guide the acquisition and stewardship of the town's public art collection. The committee is made up of volunteer appointees from across the community, people with roots in arts, culture, education, heritage, and civic life. And from 2023 to 2025, members contributed about 170 volunteer hours, which is a pretty serious, sustained work in service of this community. I'm pretty proud of that. In 2020, Council adopted the Cultural Master Plan. So this is Canmore's 10-year commitment to making arts and culture really central to how this town grows and thrives. It's pretty substantive. It contains 16 recommendations and 52 specific actions. These are organized around 4 different pillars: creative economy, creative places, creative people, and creative identity. So we like to think of it as Canmore's blueprint for being a town where culture isn't just an amenity. It's really woven into everyday life. A place where 20,000 people gather around art during a sporting event, where a public installation earns recognition from the United Nations. The Cultural Master Plan is the framework that makes those things possible, and our job as a committee is to help advance that plan, which is exactly what we're doing here today. I want to pause for a second and just talk about what we mean by art and culture. So the committee took some time today to adopt in the past 2 years, to adopt these specific definitions of art and culture. So these aren't abstract things. They're the shared lens that we use to evaluate the work that we do and to provide advice to Council. So art, as we define it, is a universal form of human expression that nurtures creativity, fuels innovation, and celebrates diversity. Culture is broader. It's the spiritual, material, and intellectual character of a society, expressed through music, visual arts, language, digital media, and Indigenous living knowledge and history. Both definitions draw on UNESCO frameworks. And what matters practically is this. Canmore culture includes sculptures and murals around the town, gatherings at the Civic Center, and traditional knowledge shared at Truth and Reconciliation gatherings. And that breadth of what culture means is really intentional. And this slide here really gets at the heart of why this all matters. What does art and culture actually do for people who live in Canmore? So I want to take a minute to talk about Art Walk in the Woods. So during the Cross Country World Cup in 2024, which is the International Ski Federation's premier cross-country event, Canmore hosted this amazing world-class sporting event. Woven into it was a public art walk through the natural landscape, and about 20,000 spectators attended. 7,300 were unique visitors there specifically to see the art. That is culture, meeting sport, meeting nature, all in one place. And we think this is a great example of how you can make a mountain community like ours really livable. This slide, I just wanted to highlight 2 public art pieces that really help tell Canmore's story. It shows you what a thoughtful public art program can really produce, work that earns a place in the life of our community. The grizzly bear sculpture on the left is by Cedar Mueller, and it was acquired through a competitive open call. It became a community icon almost immediately. People nicknamed it, they photographed it, it drew a lot of attention, and it kind of became part of how this town thinks of itself. The artist saw real commercial success, which speaks to the caliber of work that our public art program attracts, and also the benefit that opportunities like our public art calls really offer to individual artists in our community. And the piece on the right is Glacier by Elva Gallagher. It's a climate-inspired work that speaks directly to Glacier Retreat. The United Nations Glacier Preservation Leadership Team specifically recognized it, which is a pretty neat international signal that Canmore's cultural voice has reached well beyond our town limits. Our artists are speaking to the world's most pressing issues, and the world is paying attention. On this slide, I've just kind of brought together 2 stories that belong side by side, how the community is showing up for culture, and then what that engagement is producing. So an example of some participation going on around culture in the community. In 2025, the Arts and Culture team supported 52 events, which is more than 4 per month. We had 88 artists apply to the Three Sisters Gallery in Elevation Place in both 2024 and 2025. And the Indigenous-themed applications to the Three Sisters Gallery art calls grew by 37.5%. In 2025, all Treaty 7 nations participated in the Town of Canmore's Truth and Reconciliation programming. And that's the result of relationships built on trust and consistency. It really takes years of showing up. And then looking at what that engagement is producing, federal heritage grants have grown from about $10,000 in 2023 to over $22,000 requested for 2025. And that just shows like federal funders are really invested in communities where programming is credible and well organized. And again, just thinking of that glacier installation that earned recognition from the UN, showing that Canmore's cultural voice is reaching beyond our borders. And now let's take a look at the Cultural Master Plan. So I want to give you a pretty straight look at where we're at right now. Of the 52 actions, 6 are complete, 16 are in progress, 27 are not started, 1 is delayed, and 2 have been categorized as not supported, meaning they're not relevant or they fall outside the direct mandate of arts and culture now. So kind of to be direct about the 27 that haven't been started, the Cultural Master Plan is pretty ambitious. It was written as a 10-year vision. It got slightly disrupted at the beginning there by COVID for sure. And we are 5 years in. So not all of these actions are expected to be completed by 2030. Some require coordination across different departments, and some require infrastructure decisions that sit at a different level of the organization or again, outside of arts and culture. So really what this slide tells you is the plan is still alive, it's being actively worked on, and the Cultural Advisory Committee is trying to provide honest tracking of where things stand. And just to mention that these unstarted actions may need to be reviewed before the next cultural planning cycle. So based on 2 years of advisory work, The committee has identified 7 observations, which is part of our requirement as a committee. These are patterns and trends that need attention as we all move forward. I'm not going to go deep on them today because the full details are in your package, but I can just kind of quickly walk through them. So 1 is public art governance, and that has actually improved significantly. So we have clearer processes now, better conflict of interest protocols, and a new public art plan. The focus, we hope now, will shift to stewardship and life cycle planning to kind of protect what the town has already built. Number 2, we want to be able to clearly distinguish between CMP, focused work, so again, cultural master plan focused work, and then general municipal programming. That role clarity really matters, and without it, it's difficult to advance CMP priorities while also maintaining the community benefits of broader programming. 3 is that the cultural sector is a genuine economic contributor. Provincially, professional artists contribute about $12 billion in GDP, and in the town of Canmore, we see programs like the microgrant program, public art program, and Main Street art installations building a foundation that support individual artists and raising the profile of Canmore as an arts and culture hotspot for visitors and residents. 4, it's really about gathering information on cultural data. We don't yet measure cultural outcomes consistently across planning cycles. So without that, we just have the risk of momentum being lost, as from one CMP cycle to the next, we lose information as we go from one cycle to the next. So building that cultural data framework is a real priority for us going forward. 5, cultural priorities need to be integrated early into land use, parks, facilities, and social development decisions, not added after the fact. So the strongest cultural outcomes happen when culture is at the table from the start. 6, inclusion requires intentional strategy. So there's a very strong interest from underrepresented communities to be here in Canmore working in the arts and culture sector, but there are real barriers that need to be addressed. One specific opportunity that the committee has identified is better coordination between the CMP implementation and the town's READY committee, just to clarify responsibilities and strengthen internal and external inclusion efforts. And then 7, cultural infrastructure objectives are consistently deferred from one planning cycle to the next without any early groundwork. So several of the cultural master plan recommendations in this area are not started or they're only partially implemented. So we think that coordinated alignment between the cultural sector and municipal planning could help close that gap. So as we look ahead, 4 things stand out as areas where continued attention will strengthen what Canmore's culture community has already built. First is annual reporting from the CAC to Council. We're really excited to be here today doing this report and presentation, and we're hoping that it will continue to be an ongoing conversation with Council and not so episodic. That accountability really matters to us. Second is cultural spaces. So Canmore's creative community is active and growing, and different spaces around the town are really central to the CMP vision, such as the Miners Union Hall. Third, the most livable communities weave culture into how they plan neighborhoods, parks, and facilities from the beginning, not adding culture as kind of an add-on. And we'd like to see that integration grow here in town. And then 4th, programs like the microgrant and sector development workshops send a clear signal to Canmore's artists. This community values what you do. So that signal matters for artist retention and livability, and also for those who support Canmore's cultural fabric. So everyone, mayors and councillors and everyone in the room, on behalf of the Cultural Advisory Committee, I just want to thank you for your time and for your support on Canmore's cultural life. We're really proud of this work. We are committed to continuing it, and we're excited about the next chapter. We welcome any questions you have.
Thank you very much, and thank you for that wonderful presentation. Arts and culture is an amazing component of our community. It is part of the fabric, and more so than many communities. At one point, there was a statistic that we had more people earning a living from the arts than most places in Canada. I think there was only one that was higher than us at one point. So it's amazingly important and fundamental. And thank you to the whole committee in all the hours that have been put in, and that you'll continue to put in for the betterment of our of our town here. There's a number of questions coming here, so I'll just call on, first of all, Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Ms. Moreland. You've done such a great job presenting. And yeah, like I am on the CAC, and I just also want to say thank you so much for the members that are here and all the great work you've done. I think one of the challenges has been timing, right? When the CMP came in 2020, there was that 3-4 year boom of like challenging things, and then all the other social issues we had to deal with. And so I'm hopeful that as we move forward into this new term, we can actually have a more revitalized action towards the arts. One of the points you brought up on the slide, Ms. Moreland, was talking about how weaving arts into a community's development at the first stage as opposed to an add-on at the end. Can you speak more towards that and like how we could see that in application, or there's like some real life examples that we as council should ponder on like, okay, this is an opportunity coming up. Let's see how we can put arts at the forefront of that thought process.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I might ask.
I think Dawn was ready
help
too.
I figured we would tag team the responses.
Okay.
Thank you for that question, Councillor Ma. Yes, that work is underway with examples such as Connect Downtown, and the ARP, where there is those sites that are identified as potential future sites for public art. And there are recommendations within the public art plan around creating planning manuals for art on private property and how to address those issues early on in the process. So those recommendations and that framework is in place already. So I think it's really stewardship of some of those recommendations to ensure that those processes are in place and continue to be strong.
Okay.
So, hello, I can add to that. When you start involving artists and community members that are involved in culture and art, in the beginning, you'll have more genuine artworks and more thoughtful processes around what that means and helping us determine what those barriers could be too when those projects come along. So if you involve people from the beginning, it really does help strengthen what the outcomes could be.
Thank you.
Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Ms. Moreland, for your presentation. A couple of questions here. So you mentioned the 27 not started priorities. We've got 4 years left. Probably won't have time to get to all of them. Is there a way that the advisory committee is prioritizing some of these? And if they are, is there, like maybe can you give us little highlights of some of the short-term priorities at the moment?
I can. This is relevant because our last meeting that we had was really about this, looking ahead to what the next year will bring and what we want to prioritize. What I would say is coming to the forefront for all of our committee members is really public engagement. So there's a lot in the cultural master plan about checking in with the community, doing what they call pulse checks or annual forums, gathering folks from arts and culture across the community to say, is this still relevant? What are the current barriers? What are the current trends? The committee is composed of folks from different areas within the community, but there's always gaps, and that's what we're realizing as well. There's a lot of people involved in arts and culture in Canmore in different ways. There are several organized groups that we can identify, like Pine Tree Players and Arts Place, and there's a whole bunch of others that I'm missing right now, but there's also individuals who don't have a group to belong to, who are part of the arts and culture community, and people who identify in that way but don't have a place here. Like they're an individual, they don't have that community around them. So we're trying to figure out how do we engage them more and learn a bit more about what the current sector looks like for arts and culture in Canmore. A lot of the data that we do have is from 2019, which as you can imagine is fortunately a little out of date now. So we're hoping to be able to learn a bit more from the community about what's going on with arts and culture and looking for collaboration where possible with other organizations. There's a lot of intent this year to do consultation with community from different groups, and we just want to make sure that we're doing that strategically and collaboratively so the community is not over-questioned. There's a lot of surveys that go around. Yeah, so I think that's one thing that really comes to the forefront. The other one I would say is that data collection piece. Like if there's a way of getting more information out of the arts and culture activities that are currently managed by the town, how can we learn more from that to show what arts and culture is doing for the town of Canmore, how it's improving livability, that type of thing.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
My other question is, I'm not sure who best to answer this one, but one of the recommendations that stuck out for me was around the Miners Union Hall, which was mentioned in the presentation. Coordinate the booking process of Miners Union Hall for local cultural activity that prioritizes cultural use and eliminates rentals for weddings or commercial use. The current leasee of that space has sort of gone in a different direction and is pushing more of those private rentals. Is this still a priority of the master plan? And maybe can someone speak to that? I don't know.
Yes, thank you for that question. That's a really good one, because there was recent consultation done, so yeah.
Ms. McLeod?
The CAC can speak a little bit to this as well in their priority, but with the town, we have, of course, a memorandum of understanding for the use of that space, and that agreement also outlines priority setting. There's some annual reporting that is in place that would identify how that priority has been advanced in that engagement. So that clarity of language has been implemented in the last MOU, and we are in the process of tracking the success rate of actually seeing greater impact for our cultural groups and industry to have access to cultural spaces, because there's not a lot of them available. And of course, the higher value rentals are often indeed in the wedding space, and it's a beautiful location. I can't deny anybody that, but we do want to make sure that that approach is balanced as it is a town facility.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Councillor Graham?
Thank you, Mayor Crozert. Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for all the work that all of you have done on this file in the last several years. I'm very happy to see such a strong Indigenous component to a lot of the thought around these documents. You mentioned that we'd gone from 37% increase, but I always want to look behind the large percentage numbers, and 3 to 4 is a 33% increase. So I'm wondering, as a comparison to the rest of the applications and the programming that we're doing, and I wonder if you can just speak more to the Indigenous components that we're looking at and how we can help strengthen those along the way.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Jeannie or Sue, did you want to speak to that? Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Councillor Graham. Yes, that statistic, that number is directly in correlation to the Three Sisters Gallery. So we often see pieces 16 to 25 artworks in there, so you're not wrong about that. But nonetheless, that's a significant increase to the application rate. Establishing relationships across Treaty 7 takes time, and it's thoughtful, meaningful consultation across different nations. So having those applications come in, although it may only be, the actual number may only be 3 to 7 or so, represents a huge celebration in terms of seeing that application come in terms of relationship building, in terms of capacity building for navigating some public art processes and application processes that can be quite difficult in terms of the information that they're asking for, navigating different kinds of systems. And it is relationship-based to be working together to have those applications come in for programs such as that. So to continue that work, I think it's really prioritizing that time and that capacity and that support to be establishing those relationships, both maintaining those relationships and seeking out new ones. So the team with Arts and Culture and across the town of Canmore is doing that work and needs to continue to do that work and prioritize mostly time, I'd say, to be spending that time visiting without necessarily a production outcome or an application intake outcome, but really that time visiting to establish an understanding from which wonderful things can happen is what we're seeing as part of some of the work here with the Cultural Advisory Committee, and really appreciate Don Saunders-Dahl and other voices and elders that are supporting this work and helping it to move forward in a good way.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
I just have one thing to add to that actually as well. Something that the Cultural Advisory Committee does do too is it takes a look at the public art calls that are going out for Three Sisters Gallery. We look at the language that's being used, the theme and the topics, And we talk about what barriers might be inherent within that to try to make it a bit more open to really everyone, particularly Indigenous people who might want to apply. And everyone in the committee can contribute to that. And then the Public Art Subcommittee sits underneath kind of the CAC. And so we do review annually the folks who are part of that committee. And we do try to make sure that the juries who are reviewing the art are also representative of the community and from the Treaty 7 Nations as well, so that we have like people from all communities and nations who are able to kind of jury and select the art that's put on display. And I think there is some merit that I've heard from folks in the community about being able to see Indigenous art on display is really encouraging for other Indigenous artists to apply as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, just wanted to say that.
Thank you for that. It's a fantastic piece to see, and I encourage you to keep in that direction, and we'll support it as best we can.
Councillor Ma.
This is my last question for the CAC here. I think decades ago, what happened was Canmore was a lot less expensive to live in. And around the coal mine closing, et cetera, there was like a whole wave of artists who were able to come to Canmore, establish themselves under probably more favorable livable conditions under economics. And they've done a lot for our community, and they've set a tone of like what culture could be. But I wonder now, as we're like moving into these times, like what is it that the next wave of artists need? Because I imagine they're struggling with various things. So I was just curious, in your perspectives, CAC, what is it that we need to do to ensure that this next wave of artists can actually set the stage for the next wave after that?
Well, as a practicing artist here, I've been here for over a decade, definitely space. From what I'm seeing at Listen Studios, there's a number of people who are asking me to rent the space and still can't afford my very tiny rent amounts. So I think having accessible space for everybody to be able to make work in or enjoy workshops too. I've heard a number of people who can't afford coming to some workshops too. So I think there's just a lot of barriers for people who are living here and want to partake. If there's ways, especially around space, I would say that's a huge, for me, number one, that I keep hearing time and time again for the last 10 years.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just to add briefly to that, I think it ties back to our interest as a committee in engaging with the community to better understand, as you're saying, what are the barriers that they're facing today. You know, I feel like when I come to it, my knowledge from that entry level of what it means to be an artist and how to set yourself up to practice is from 10 years ago at this point. So it would be really lovely to be able to engage with the community members now and really better understand what are the barriers they're facing and what could the town do. Yeah, excellent question. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much for the wonderful report today, and we won't make it the last time either. The first and last, no. First of several. Great. Thank you very much. Have a good rest of the day. Okay, so the next three items on our agenda are the council updates, admin updates, and the resolution action list. Now, these are included to ensure key information is provided to all of council and the community and to support transparency. All updates contain important, timely information, and just as an example, the report to the community is in there as Appendix A to the administration report. And I'd like to thank and acknowledge everyone for the work that they put into these updates. Council members wishing to make any comments or ask questions can indicate their interest in doing that now. Otherwise, we'll move on. So any questions on any of those items, the council updates, administrative updates, or the council resolution action list? Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Worship. I had a bunch of notes in here, and suddenly they're not there. But you attended something with Senator Sorensen and Mr. Lukasik.
Yeah.
And I think you meant to say, sorry, I'm just trying to find it here. Forever Canada as opposed to Proud Canada, maybe?
Let me just pull it up.
Sorry, I'm just, there it is.
Just what page, please? There it is. Okay,
What page was it?
Page 80, under other points of interest.
there we go.
You mentioned proudly Canadian, and that may be the answer.
Oh, yeah.
I would bet it was forever Canadian.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
may have been. I probably just wrote what was in my calendar.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was Forever Canadian that the invite was sent out at or not, but it was with respect to the Forever Canadian campaign. The invitation came from Senator Sorensen to CAO Cottland and myself to attend with others that she had invited to hear about an update from Mr. Legassy as to what's next with their campaign.
Should we update the Cow report to change that in there, or is it required? No. Yeah, okay.
It's not really, yeah, it's not
Yeah,
material.
it's not a big one. Thanks.
Okay, anything else?
I have some other ones, but I got to find them in my notes.
Okay, Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Mayor Crowsert. I had a question for administration around the launch of the new paid parking program. And I had an inquiry from a member of the community that was asking whether or not, if they're using the app on their phone and they enter their credit card information, are there additional credit card processing fees in addition to the fee for parking? Should they be paying for parking? Thank you.
Mr. Mackay.
Thank you for the question. So there are fees, but those are borne by the municipality as part of the paid parking program. So someone using the program out there shouldn't see an increase based on a transaction fee. Yeah. There may be different clients who choose to charge those in addition, but we haven't gone that route.
So the user of the paid parking will just see the rate that they are for the time that they're using it.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that question. Any other questions? Okay, and so as you've noted, I've approached these sections differently than in the past, and I'm going to continue to go this way because we all read them. They're there for the public for, like I say, transparency reasons, and I'll just be opening it up to questions. Now, Councillor Graham, you found your next question?
Thank you, Your Worship. Under the municipal enforcement section, department focused on education enforcement, speeding and wildlife and coexistence in March. I wonder, was there any data along the wildlife coexistence section that we might tease from that?
What page are we looking at?
On page 99, under protective services, third bullet, bottom of the page.
Mr. Mackay?
So just to, Councillor Graham, just to confirm the question, you're wondering about statistics related to March's proactive efforts in those areas?
Yes, sir.
We don't have any, I don't have stats on those yet, but it is something we can look to provide at the end of the month or into April sometime if that's of interest to
Thank you. I'll endeavor to
council.
give you a little more heads up on that one beforehand.
No, I mean, staff are still focusing in those areas for the rest of March, so.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, I don't
Thank
have
you.
those live.
I think the reason that that's put in is it just shows that municipal enforcement, in addition to responding to complaints, they have a proactive focus for different times of the year. And at this time of year, it's on speeding and wildlife coexistence. Right, okay.
And one last one, if I may.
Yep, please do.
Under page 101, Public Works, streets and roads, snow and ice removal. Just wanted to confirm that we're meeting the service level expectations that are set out in our contracts.
Mr. Haynes.
Hi there. I know that Public Works is working with the contractor on service levels delivery. I know there's been some challenges in the last major snowfalls during the December months, and since then there's been a focus on mainly ice control with the freeze-thaw since. With the most recent snowfall, just anecdotally, the performance seems to be better. I can check back with Public Works and report to the council to confirm.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Last just statement. Solid waste services, we've doubled, tripled our collection of organics. I think that's amazing.
It is. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I will move that we adjourn. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone.